Yes, this is a beginner class. This is only the 4th lesson. You really just have to be comfortable with hiragana and katakana. I will make sure that I still pronounce everything, whether it's written in hiragana or kanji or whatever, because I am starting to mix kanji into the classes. Just basic kanji, nothing too stressful, just so you can start getting used to it, like, you know, the basic kanji for verbs and whatnot. This is lesson 4. Last time we did questions, like question words, how to make a question, things like that. It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy, so I just want to run through just real quick. So question words, pretty straightforward for what we do for English. What in English is nan or nani. It just depends on what is coming after the question word. You'll probably hear a phrase nan desu ka, which is what is it. That's where you use nan to combine with des. Not always, but usually a good rule of thumb is if a consonant comes after, you use nan, and then if it's a vowel, you use nani. An example would be Shumatsu wa nani o shimashita ka, meaning what did you do this weekend? Nani o shimashita ka. Usually like a particle o would come after that, so that's why I use nani. Doko is where, dare is who, itsu is when, dono gurai is how long or how much, doshite is why, and dore is which one. Alright, so we're gonna get started. A lot of people wanted to add in some vocabulary lists into my lessons, which I have no problem with. Here, I put the kanjis, but I also put it in hiragana for the people that are not as well versed in kanji yet, which is completely fine. We will get there. I also, I plan to do down the road certain kanji lessons, like radicals, all that stuff. I will not just leave you high and dry, just be like, alright, we're doing all kanji now, bye, good luck. No, I'm not gonna do you like that. There are 2 different kinds of adjectives in Japanese. There's I and na. The I-Adjectives, rule of thumb, almost always, remember the word almost. I will go over the irregulars, of course. Almost always the I hiragana character is at the end for I-Adjectives, and then na-Adjectives, there's no real marker for that, I guess. That's how you tell, oh, there's a marker for I, and then there's not for na. It's just kind of how you have to remember it. I will just go through these real quick and make sure pronunciation is okay. Just read them, say them to yourself, whatever you need to do. Write them down. Starting with the I side, oki is big, chisai is small. With those, you have repeating, if you were to write it in Romanji, I guess, you have repeating vowel sounds. So make sure you put the emphasis on that. So instead of saying oki, it's oki. Same thing with the second one, chisai, chisai. You don't have to exaggerate it, of course. I'm just exaggerating for emphasis. So, oki, chisai, atarashi is new. Furui is old. Takai is tall or expensive. It just depends on the context, of course. It'll be easy to kind of tell. Like when you're talking about height, you usually say ga takai. So, and then expensive is just, takai in the context of shopping, I guess. Opposite of that is yasui, which is cheap. Tanoshi is fun. Utsukushi. Make sure you know that pronunciation. Utsukushi is beautiful. Then we'll switch to the not side. Genki is energetic or healthy. You've probably heard that phrase of genki desu ka, meaning how are you? The literal translation is are you well? Are you healthy? That's just kind of the literal versus what you actually say. So genki can be used in other contexts also. Shizuka is quiet. Benri, convenient. Tsuteki is lovely or wonderful. Shinsetsu is kind. Tsuki is liked or favorite, which we will talk about that later. That's a very important one. Daiji is important. And kantan is easy or simple. And we have a few others that we'll be working through, but those are some main ones that you want to add to your vocab lists or your flashcards or your Anki deck, whatever you use. Let's start on the I-Adjective side. These are, I want to say easier. I think easier, in my opinion at least. You have endings on these adjectives just like how we would have in the mas forms of verbs, for example. You start with the infinitive, which is tanoshi. That's the dictionary form. Infinitive, same thing. So here in the polite form, you just add dis to it. When I write things down, I usually stick with the polite form. But I will also just go over the casual just so you know both sides of it. We'll be doing more casual things in the future. So you can talk to your friends versus your bosses or any strangers, anything like that. Infinitive form, you You just add des at the end of it, saying it is fun. And then for the past form, past affirmative, you drop the E sound, or the E letter, and you add katta. Make sure you have the small tsu in between, and when you pronounce it, it's kind of like a small jump. So, katta, tanoshikatta. So, same thing, you add des at the end to make it more formal. Tanoshikatta desu. Tanoshikatta desu is it was fun. That's just the affirmative past tense. Then, the negative form, I put these together instead of putting the tense together. I put the positive and the negative together because there's a pattern there. So when you do negative, change the E at the end to a ku letter, ku sound, and add nai des at the end. Nai is just the ending, add des for formality. Tanoshikunai desu. Tanoshikunai desu. You add the nai form for the negative, for just the plain present negative. But then you can kind of treat like you're building on itself, I guess. So when you look at the past affirmative, you dropped the E and added katta. If you see the pattern, there's the same thing in the negative forms. So you have tanoshikunai and add katta. So that's how you change it from whatever the present tense is to whatever the past tense is, whether it be positive or negative. You start with, for it is not fun, just present negative, tanoshikunai. Then you drop the E and add katta, so you have tanoshikunakatta. Tanoshikunakatta. And then, of course, add des for formality. So I'll repeat all of those one more time. Affirmative, so positive present tense is tanoshi desu. Just the infinitive with des. Then you go to positive past, which is tanoshikatta. Tanoshikatta desu. Negative side. Negative present. Tanoshi kunai desu. Tanoshi kunai desu. Same pattern, drop the E and add katta. Tanoshi kunakatta desu. Tanoshi kunakatta. It was not fun. The chart on the side for those visual people like I am that like the charts. Otherwise, you got the paragraph. Whatever works for you. We have the same format when it comes to na-adjectives. The positive present tenses are the exact same in I and na. You use the infinitive form of shizuka for this example, shizuka. Use the infinitive form and add des at the end. It's exactly the same as before. Shizuka desu is it is quiet. Very easy, very straightforward. Here, you don't really conjugate the adjective itself when you do positive past tense, affirmative past. Shizuka desu. You're conjugating the des part of it here. So it's shizuka deshita. The des form has its own little conjugation. Des is the affirmative present tense, and then deshita is affirmative past tense. So you're conjugating the des form instead of the actual adjective itself. So that part is pretty straightforward. Now the negative form, I mean, it's really not that complicated. But there are a lot of ways that you can do it. So the standard that a lot of people are taught and that a lot of people use regularly is the janai form. Shizuka janai desu. That's just, I guess, a marker of negative. And then kind of same pattern here where you have janai. You have the E at the end. Drop the E and add katta at the end. The present negative form. Shizuka janai desu. And then the past negative form. Shizuka janakatta desu. Janakatta desu. And then the options for negative forms, they're very similar. Janai is, I guess, the standard that's more universal. It depends on the dialect. You can also see dewanai is another thing, and it's exactly the same as janai, where you can do shizuka dewanai desu, and then shizuka dewanakatta desu. Ja arimasen and dewa arimasen, both of those, they're not used very often. You may still see them, so I wanted to at least add them. In those cases, you already have the masen form, which is already polite, so you don't add des to the end of it. I've said this in a past lesson, but like, you can only be so formal That's the way that I think of it, at least. So here, you don't add the des form. It, like, takes the formality for it. So it would be Shizuka ja arimasen. So no des at the end. Same thing. Next would be Shizuka ja arimasen deshita. That's just the same conjugation for aru, the verb to be, at the end. So arimasen, arimasen deshita. It doesn't apply here, but just to finish the conjugation, I guess, for aru, arimasu, arimashita, arimasen, arimasen deshita. Like the same conjugation as that verb. So you've seen it before. And then same thing with de wa arimasen. Same thing, you don't add des at the end, so it's just Shizuka de wa arimasen and Shizuka de wa arimasen deshita. Positive present and past have the same format. Same with negative present and past. They have the same format, the same idea, I guess. Des and deshita, and then janai, ja nakatta. So na-adjectives do have some irregulars. There are some that end in the E character, but they're actually not I-Adjectives. And there's really not a formula for that, so you kind of just have to remember them. Mostly remember the main ones of, kirei is a big one. You see that a lot, clean or beautiful. And then yume is famous. So it ends in the E, but it's actually a na-adjective. Really just kind of depends. But the formula you can remember, or things that you can remember, is liking and disliking something. They feel like verbs, and they're kind of verbs in English, but they are treated as adjectives. So it functions like to like or to dislike something. I guess it's describing the noun as something that you like. The sentence, inu ga suki desu, is I like dogs. Inu ga suki desu. The tsuki at the end is really, it's an adjective, but it sounds so much like a verb. So that can throw people off. The dog is the subject, so you're describing it as something that is likable. That's the best explanation that I can give in English. It's just one of those disconnects that languages have. Just reading through this, kirai is to dislike something, tsuki is to like, kirei, clean, beautiful, and yume is famous. Watch some of these verbs. I will point them out to you, of course, in my lessons if they are irregulars. Those two of kirei and yume are kind of the main ones that people remember as, oh, this is a trap. This is not actually an E. So you would conjugate it the same as kirei janai desu. Same thing. And then yume janai desu. Those are the main irregulars that we're going to deal with, and I will point them out. Another chart still gives you the exact same endings that we talked about. This chart has the de wa arimasen and ja arimasen, just as an example of that, but you can always replace it for janai. And fun fact, for the na-adjective part for ja arimasen, arimasen is the polite form of aru. And we're going to look at this next lesson when we do casual forms. The casual form of aru is nai. So really, you're just replacing it with casual, and then des is the polite part of it. So it all kind of follows the same pattern. So ja arimasen, and then the casual form of that, of arimasen, is just nai. Ja nai. Shizuka ja nai. And if you see at the top, there's a little exception for the adjective good. And we're going to talk about that. So this is just a repeat of the chart. Alright, here's the irregular of E for good. No matter what, this verb is completely irregular. There are some, I don't have an example off the top of my head, there are some verbs that end in E, like the double E. Oh, kakkoi, which is cool. That ends in a double E, so you would conjugate it exactly like this. E is good, so same thing, you use the infinitive form, which is I des, for just the positive present form. I des, it is good. Then yokunai is the negative present tense. The rest of these three use the yo. Honestly, I don't know why. There was some kind of old conjugation back in the day for E, which is, it was like yoi, I think. So we just kind of went with this and we kept it, and now it's changed to E. Languages evolve and do this crazy stuff, so I have to research that a little bit more. If that's something that you're interested in, we can talk about that. But yeah, negative form, yokunai, and then positive past tense is yokatta desu. So it still has the similar form of the others, of the I-Adjectives, of kunai, kata, nakata, ku nakata. And then the negative past tense is yoku nakata, yoku nakata. Same format for the most part, the endings at least. This one you just need to remember it does come off a little bit different. That second one is omoshiroi, as interesting. I have the translations, of course, for what you're looking for. We're going to conjugate these. This is the present tense version, and we have the next one that'll be past tense, so go through these super fast, these 5. Let's go over this real quick. Number 1, this room is spacious. Kono heya wa blank desu. Hiroi is spacious, and this is just the regular present tense, so it's just hiroi. Hiroi desu. Kono heya wa hiroi desu. Number 2, sono eiga wa blank desu. That movie is not interesting. So we are doing present negative, so omoshiroi turns into omoshirokunai. Omoshirokunai. Number 3, today's weather is not cold. Kyou no tenki wa blank desu. So samui is cold. This is negative, so samui turns into samukunai. Samukunai desu. This restaurant is famous. Kono restaurant wa blank desu. Yume is famous. This was a little easy. It's a little bit of a curveball because yume is actually a na-adjective. So, yume desu is famous. Kono restaurant wa yume desu. Teacher is not kind. So, sensei wa blank desu. Shinsetsu is kind. And it's a na-adjective. So, sensei wa shinsetsu janai desu. What about it turns into ku? The ku is only when it's negative. So let's go back real quick so we can talk about this so I can actually look at it. So for the e turns into a ku when it is negative. If you see right here on the negative part, that's essentially how it will turn into the negative, the nai form. So you have to have the ku in there. So if it's like tanoshinai, that just that's weird. So tanoshikunai, that's just the whole format, and that's only in the negative form. And really, it's only in the negative I-Adjective form because the na doesn't have that. We can also, I wanted to focus on verb conjugation, but I will also show you guys why it's called a na-adjective. I'll show that to you also. Here, when you see the na-adjectives, right now we're just working on the conjugations of shizuka janai desu. That's if it comes at the end of a sentence. What you can do also, I'll add this at the bottom, if it comes kind of at the beginning or in the middle of a sentence, that's where the na comes in. We've got shizuka. Shizuka is just the main na-adjective. When it comes at the end, that's where the conjugations come in. But if it's at the beginning or in the middle of a sentence, that's where you use na. That's where the name comes from. So, we have, let's do this sentence of, he is a quiet person. Let's do that. So, that would be, kare wa shizuka na hito desu. And then we have the na in there right here. Kare wa shizuka na hito desu. Same thing. This is just written out in hiragana so you guys can see, just in case. So when you are actively describing a noun in the middle of a sentence, that's where you use the na in there. That's where you have to add it. So, kare wa shizuka na hito desu. But if it's coming at the end, you just conjugate it like normal. If you're using the negative form, which is shizuka janai desu, you don't have to use na. You only put janai. This is the regular form, the affirmative present tense. So, kare wa shizuka na hito desu. Now here, you don't have to use na because you still have the janai part, which basically designates it as a na adjective. Kare wa shizuka janai hito desu. Hito means person, yes. He is a quiet person, he is not a quiet person. Those are just a couple of those examples there. So that's just kind of basic of why we use na. That's just a basic explanation of that. You don't have to focus on that right this second, because that's a whole other thing of, describing nouns, but it's before the actual noun and in the beginning of the sentence, like demonstrative phrases or whatever that technical term is for it. But that can be down the line. So just a little background on that, just so you can kind of understand where the na is coming from. Back to the practice that we just did. The ku nai is just for i-Adjectives. You don't use that in na. They have their own little thing of janai. I kind of tricked you on the fourth one because yume is actually a na-Adjective. But I wanted to make sure that you could ignore that part of it and it wouldn't throw you off and just say, yume desu. And then same thing, he or she setsu is also a na-Adjective. So then you add janai at the end of it. We're going to do another practice so you can give it a shot. But this time, the practice will be past tense. Was or was not. Now here, everything actually lined up correctly, so let's give these a try. These are all past tense. But they're mixed in with I and na adjectives, so give this a shot. If you mess up, it's all good. Let's try this one out real quick. All of this is past tense, remember. Number 1, yesterday's party was fun. Kino no party wa blank desu. Tanoshii, which was the example verb that we talked about. Tanoshii is fun. So, yesterday's party was fun. So, think of the present tense, which is tanoshii desu. To make it past, you drop the I and add katta at the end. Tanoshikatta desu. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward on that one. Same thing here. Sono hon wa blank desu. That book was difficult. Positive past. Muzukashii. Same thing. I-Adjective. Muzukashii. Same thing as the beginning one. Drop the I and add katta in there. So, muzukashikatta. 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 That's how you say it slowly. Just a little tip. Don't say muzukashikatta to make it flow more. You just say shikatta. Just the shikatta. So, muzukashikatta. Just, by the way, to make it sound more natural. Alright, the trip was not tough. Taihen. Taihen means tough or difficult. Same thing. This is a na-Adjective. Taihen janakatta. Now, for the sake of consistency, I added the deshita at the end. But, to make it make sense, you can have taihen ja arimasen deshita to make it make sense. Same thing, those are still correct. But, just to make it easier, was not tough. Make sure you have the katta at the end to make it past negative. So, taihen ja nakatta desu. Number 4. This room was clean or beautiful. Kono heya wa blank deshita. Kirei. That is one of the ones that I mentioned earlier, which is deceptive. It is a na-Adjective. Even though it ends in I, it is a na-Adjective still. Kirei deshita. Because it was past positive, it's pretty easy there. Just make sure you add deshita at the end because it is na. If you say kirei or kirekatta, that's just messed up. Kirekatta, it just sounds weird. Kirei deshita because it is na. Number 5. Sono eiga wa blank desu. That movie was not long. So it is negative past. Nagai is long, which is an I-Adjective, straightforward. Naga kunakatta. Because it is negative and past, you add the kunakatta at the end. That's where you get the ku from, because it is negative. Was not long. That's how you distinguish, I guess. Think of it this way. On this one, break it up. Nagai, or the naga, in there is long. Kuna, in there, is not. And then kata is was. If that helps. Naga kunakatta. Just think of it like that. That's usually how it has to work for the irregulars. You just have to know them. There's really not a pattern that you can pick up on. It's kind of like, it's kind of similar to the verbs that we did back on the first lesson, where we did like the u and ru verbs, but a few of the ru verbs end in ru, but they're actually group 1 for the u. It's a whole thing. So, like kaeru, it ends in a ru, but it's actually a group 1, so you have to conjugate it as kaerimasu, like that. For example, you just kind of have to know those. It's not really a pattern that you can just pick up on, which sucks. I would love that. That would be so much easier. Yeah, that's just something that you've got to remember. I love Tandem. These have pretty good explanations on adjectives. It's pretty cool. Same thing here that I talked about, where it says like, so same thing where like you can be polite and have the arimasen at the end, or you can just do kunai, which is the more recognized version of it. And then this thing right here, this is E. So usually, this is kind of why, what I mentioned before of the yokunai, sometimes you read that kanji as yo instead of E. So that's kind of why you have yokunai here. Yokunai, like this whole thing is kind of, you have to know the kanji and how to work it, just the pattern here, because this is just E. But you use the same kanji here, but it's yokunai. So it's very weird. And then those are na-Adjectives. List of common adjectives. This is really good. I pulled some of these into my slide, but not all of them. Oki, semai, I, warui, kire, etc., etc. So yeah. Let's go back. Yeah, see, like, you see here, E is really the main irregular adjective that you've got to worry about. But yeah, otherwise you've got a few others. I don't know why it's not showing up, but I'll dig for it and I can find a list and send it off to everybody. But yeah, the main ones that, like, kire, make sure you know that one like the back of your hand. Add that to your list, because sometimes what you can do when you're doing something like this is put the na in parentheses. So you can put kire, like in your notes, kire, na, like that. Just so you know that it's a na adjective, like this. Yeah, kire na. That could help you in your notes. Okay. Once you know the deal, I think it's going to be easier to recognize. Yeah. Yeah, add these words here. Let's pull this up again if you want to screenshot and send this also. Add these to your list, to your vocab lists and everything. Because I mean, it is pretty straightforward once you know what to look for. Once you know the irregulars. Like, start with the irregulars and then move into others. I think that would be my advice. Because once you know the irregulars, everything else is just easy to find. So if you know that kire and yume are not adjectives, then any other E that you find in, I guess, the most basic, we're speaking on just basic words that you use every day. Just the basic adjectives, nothing too obscure. But once you know that these are the irregulars that you're not going to touch, and then you see an E at the end, you're like, oh, that's easy. But then if you see no E at the end, then that's also easy. So just ingrain that in your brain. That's in my opinion, of course.